So we're talking about Eichel again, but it's not in the same vein as all of the other videos we have made. All the previous videos have been insiders giving us leads as to which teams are in and which teams are out, and believe me, there have been more updates on that front, but I think it would get a little bit more repetitive than it already has been if we just started rehashing the same teams again, as we have been already. So even though Elliotte Friedman gave us a list of teams that might be interested and might be involved, until we get some bigger, newer teams and bigger stories behind them, I'm going to refrain from making too many videos, I guess, about Eichel, mostly because, you know, I make videos every day, but, like, talking only about Eichel gets kind of old pretty quickly, so we gotta sprinkle in a lot of other stuff there as well. Either way, though, today's Eichel video is not gonna be in the same vein, because we're not talking about an insider giving us information. Instead, we're going over an interview that Jack Eichel himself did with Boston 25 News earlier this week, and it was a pretty big one. Because Eichel himself is in it, and Eichel himself gives a whole bunch of indications, I guess, as to what's going on in his head as he goes through this entire rehabilitation process, waiting for the surgery and waiting for whatever it is this NHL team that acquires him, or the Buffalo Sabres, just them, would set out for him health-wise. And the quote comes here, the big one that is revealed in this Boston 25 News interview with Eichel. They talk a lot about where it is Eichel grew up and what he likes to do at his hometown. You know, he's from Massachusetts, he's from Ma, he's got himself a Boston Bruins connection right there from Chelmsford, Massachusetts. And then Eichel says this: "I think every kid grows up dreaming about playing for their hometown team. Whether that happens now or later in my career." And then the interview actually pauses up and it goes to a different segment in the interview where the interviewer tells Eichel, "I admire all the work that you've done." And this kind of thing got a whole bunch of people really antsy, because it was like, oh, did Jack Eichel really just reveal that he wants to play for Boston? I mean, you don't usually get a response like this, don't you? From NHL stars being asked, "Oh, do you think you could ever return to X city because you're from here and you would like to play here?" Because, yeah, the first part to what Eichel says, every kid grows up dreaming about their hometown team and playing for their hometown team, yeah, that's fine. But the last part is kind of what really sets this apart from every other NHL player who has said something like that before. Whether that happens to me now or later in my career, and the way he says later in my career, it's a really like, you know, there's a trail afterwards. There's supposed to be something that comes after, but the interview just cuts it off. Does Jack Eichel really want to come back to Boston? Because, I mean, from his own words, every kid would dream about playing for their hometown team, and the Boston Bruins are indeed Eichel's hometown team. It's what this entire segment on the news was even about. If you want to talk a little bit more about Boston and Jack Eichel, we have to go back to what we saw was mentioned by Fluto Shinzawa in The Athletic a few weeks ago. And the scoop back then was that the Boston Bruins just wouldn't really want to go after a Jack Eichel anymore, even though there's that hometown connection, because the price would be way too high. We already made a few other videos talking about how the price, according to Elliotte Friedman, is so high to the point that other NHL teams are dropping out of the conversations. A top 6 forward, a top 4 defenseman, a top 10 draft pick, and other prospects too? Yeah, that's a huge price. And the Boston Bruins, having this situation where most of their capital is invested into players on the team today, the Bruins don't really have the best prospect pool, nor the highest amount of picks, I would say. It's a lot easier for a team like that to be like, all right, well, if the price is so much, we're not going to be able to afford it. And NHL Rumors Daily comes out here on Twitter, and he gives us a little bit of a scoop in that direction. Again, NHL Rumors Daily is the Twitter account that doesn't really have a verification check mark. We don't even know who is behind it, but the guy who is behind it, they tweet out a whole bunch of stuff before it actually happens. They tweet out a whole bunch of stuff that Friedman ends up saying before Friedman says it. This guy who runs this Twitter account is dialed in. They've broken news in the past, and for some reason, this guy knows what he is talking about. Jack Eichel wanted to go to the Rangers or the Bruins for obvious reasons, is what they said back in April of this year. The timing, though, on the follow-up, is just really poor for the Bruins on this. Jack does not have a no-move clause in play, and the Bruins don't have the assets that some of the other teams, like the Rangers, the Kings, the Ducks, and the Wild, have as well. So, at the end of the day, you know, it is kind of a lost cause, I think, to proceed with Boston Bruins trade proposals and ideas, because as we noted, the Bruins, they're still trying to win now. That window is closing very, very quickly. And because of that window closing down, they can't afford to give up on all this value like other teams could. LA could go out there and trade some prospects. Okay, they have prospects available for trade. Anaheim, they have some top 6 forwards, some top 4 defensemen, and some prospects as well that could definitely outbid what it is a Bruins team could offer. Minnesota, similar boat. New York, absolutely in the same boat as well. I get it. It could be seen as really frustrating. Man, this guy is talking about how he would like to play for us on the news, but we can't make a trade for him, and he's like a franchise talent. Yeah, it sucks. You're not going to be able to do it this time. But as Eichel said, man, whether it happens now or sometime later in his career, like, is he not just kind of writing it in the stars himself? We've known this entire time Eichel has been an NHL athlete that he is a lot more outspoken than the traditional hockey guy. Even in the previous interviews, I want to win a Stanley Cup every single year. I'm so frustrated with our team for not going out there and making the playoffs. It's been 6 years of nothing for me in Buffalo. He's been super outspoken about all this stuff, so the fact that he even came out here and said this about the Boston Bruins doesn't really surprise me, because he's just kind of established himself as that kind of talkative person in my mind. Also, would it not be super interesting, like, let's say hypothetically the Bruins do acquire Eichel. How pissy would Buffalo Sabres fans go out there and become if the Boston Bruins end up finding a way to trade for Jack Eichel despite the smaller and somewhat less valuable amount of assets they hold that are available for trade compared to LA? I can bet you that a Boston proposal would be less valuable than an LA Kings proposal or a Rangers proposal or a Wild proposal. It's kind of the way it is because Boston doesn't have that many assets that they could trade away because they're still trying to contend. Imagine if the Sabres end up getting a trade from the Boston Bruins for Eichel and they're disappointed with the return. That would have been 2 straight trades for Taylor Hall and Jack Eichel between the Sabres and the Bruins, where the Sabres just end up giving their stuff for Boston and they get change in return. It would be really weird to see Jack Eichel, Taylor Hall, and X on a second line behind Marchand, Pasternak, and Bergeron. Would that be the best top 6 in the NHL? Probably. You saw how the Boston Bruins revived Taylor Hall's career. Really good for them over there. Then add a potentially motivated and hungry Jack Eichel who wants to go out there and score some points and win hockey games. You got yourselves an unmatched level of talent right there, because even when Jack Eichel is not really going out there and being the best version of himself, he can still be a point-per-game player. So it's really kind of interesting to think about the thought experiment there as to what could happen if the Bruins acquired Eichel. And, you know, it's not even a new idea. We've made a ton of videos talking about the idea of Eichel to the Boston Bruins because it's the easiest connection to make. The hometown connection, Chelmsford, Massachusetts over there, Boston University as well. He's been all over the place over here, the Beanpot, etc. I mean, this is kind of where Eichel has been super familiar with his entire career, so why wouldn't he internally want to come back? But at the end of the day, as we said, the Boston Bruins may not have the amount of assets that would be required to go out there and make a trade for Eichel that would actually beat out one of the Rangers or the Wild or the Kings or whatever. And that's unfortunate. Maybe the plan now is to just wait before Eichel becomes a free agent, he doesn't re-sign with whichever team holds his rights over there, and then he becomes a UFA and he goes to Boston then. Hey, John Tavares 2.0? Maybe? Who really knows? I mean, they're kind of in the same caliber of player anyway, so I wouldn't doubt it. I'm just kind of joking, by the way. So either way, talk to me in the comments what you thought about this entire idea over here. The video, the news interview of Jack Eichel going on to Boston News and saying, yeah, you know, it'd be cool. Today, sometime down the line, if I play for the Boston Bruins, because every team dreams of growing up and playing for their hometown team. Talk to me in the comments what you think if you enjoyed this video. Holtz and I, and bye.